I'd like to introduce our guest today, Alwyn Tan. Alwyn is a software engineer, currently a senior software engineer at Open Government Products. Alwyn has been at Open Government Products and GovTech for roughly 5 or so years.
Four and a half, really.
4.5, yeah. Close to 5 years. And so he's worked on various different products. I think people will have various questions about the things that you've worked on and how you went about building those products. Prior to GovTech, Alwyn was working at Commerzbank as an assistant vice president, maintaining some of their software, and Morgan Stanley also working on the software side of the house. And Alwyn studied information system engineering at Imperial College before that. So we'd love to hear, I guess, how your studies also interacted with your work as a software engineer. Great. So I think we'll leave it, we'll let Alwyn take it away, maybe with a short introduction, and we can open up to questions from students after that.
Sure. So I guess Kayan kind of already spoken about my work experience already, which kind of leaves me very little to talk about myself, but I'll still try anyway. So in my current role, I work on a variety of systems, mostly things that would directly impact citizens and government officers. So examples of these would be the GoGov SG link shortener, which you'll probably have run into at various points in time. Form SG is a form builder for government officers so that they can rapidly build forms and receive responses from members of the public. More recently, I'm kind of working on a project that we call Ask GovSG or Help GovSG. That's currently in the works right now, but when fully built, it aims to be something like a Quora or Stack Overflow for official government answers. That way, members of the public can actually send their queries in, have their answers answered in public, and then hopefully in future, people who have the same kind of questions would have to make a query and wait for a few days. They can instantly look this up on Google or on the internet in general. So that's me. When I was in the finance sector, I was mainly working on building systems that facilitate financial transactions. So we're talking about, like, say, building risk assessments, risk and P&L monitoring systems for the trading desks in Morgan Stanley, or in the case of Commerzbank, I was maintaining the building blocks that you would need to build a real-time trading system for bonds, lah. So that's my spiel really briefly. I realize that a lot of you are going through the boot camps right now and probably have a lot of questions as you go through it. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Awesome.
Hi, Alwyn. I'm Michelle.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us. I'd like to know what made you switch over from the finance sector to working at GovTech.
Okay. Just so that we are on the same page here, I continued to build systems when I was working for finance. So that said, I do realize that transitioning from the private to the public sector is quite a significant change. I think what kind of prompted it was, so maybe let's start from the top, right? I was introduced to GovTech through a common friend, and that's how I got to meet a couple of people who were trying to start the data science division within GovTech, or rather, they were running the data science division in GovTech. And I think what attracted me to the work that they're doing was that I realized that what they were doing was trying to cater to the needs and the pain points of the common citizen, and what they were trying to do was to actually push for change for the country, and that's not something that you can easily find elsewhere. I mean, you could argue that, like, the work I was doing could indirectly impact, say, a sovereign wealth fund, or maybe the pension funds that were being run on, say, for, say, teachers in Ontario in Canada, right? But I think the fact that I could more directly bring about change for the better in society, and the fact that I could do this alongside people that are highly proficient at what they do, and do all this in an environment that was quite accommodating, kind of prompted me to make the change lah. So I'm not sure whether this answers your question, Michelle. I'm sure that there will be further questions that you might want to ask and so on.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Hi,
More
Alwyn.
questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we usually just keep quiet for a bit just in case somebody pops up. So yeah, I'm Porter. I'm graduating in 3 months' time. Actually, I have an overview question on open government products.
Sure.
I'm just wondering what is the difference between where you're at and GovTech, and also because you've worked in both, what is the why did you change and what is the difference?
Okay, so if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you would notice that I actually would have indeed, it would state that I've worked at GovTech and then went on to work at open government products. This is really, so what actually is happening is that when I first joined GovTech, I actually joined the team that became open government products. So to be clear, OGP kind of started live as like maybe a 10 to 15 man team, built rapidly prototyping products for the data science division. So over time, that team grew into a department, actually acquired more people, and at some point, it became quite increasingly clear that it would be more appropriate to actually spin this department off into its own separate entity. So when that happened, I think what GovTech decided was that this unit should be given the general freedom to try to experiment with new technologies, new practices, maybe new ways of running a tech organization. So in that sense, OGP is experimental unit within GovTech that tries to be at the cutting edge of implementing running and exploring and implementing technology for the public good. And whatever we've learned in that process and whatever we've learned in running OGP, we hope to actually propagate on to GovTech and maybe towards with the wider government.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether that answers your question. I'm sure you must have more specific things to ask about.
I think that answers it for me because it was a segue to the second question that I was going to ask, because I have this impression that the entry into GovTech, right, requires either a degree in computer science or relevant like SWE working experience to get in. So my impression of it is that it's not so much for bootcamp graduates.
Okay.
I was wondering whether OGP was didn't function the same way as GovTech, in that
okay, that's it's interesting that you kind of brought this up, because I even when we were still part of GovTech, I am aware that a number of my colleagues were actually bootcamp graduates. So we did have people who worked alongside us as part of the products team within the data science division, as we were then known. And excuse me. And yeah, I mean, we found them to be quite capable and somebody that we were happy to work with. I'm not too entirely sure what happens with the government digital services arm in GovTech, or GDS for short. I am vaguely aware that they do entertain applications from bootcamp participants, but I do not know this for sure.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So OGP is, and GovTech is happy to welcome bootcampers.
Yeah. So what I typically do when I am receiving applications from applicants for software engineering roles is I'm not so interested in your formal qualifications. I'm really more because I believe that they merely serve as an indicator of whether you're capable it's a mere indicator of what I think your capability might be. So but there are other ways to indicate your ability, right? Like, do you have a code portfolio? Are you actively contributing to open source, right? What kind of projects are you pursuing in your free time? I think those are equally valid as indicators of your capability, and those are definitely things that I take into consideration. So I've certainly looked at people with like seemingly outstanding academic qualifications, and I have actually turned them away. Similarly, I've seen people who have gone through non-traditional routes of formal education, and we've given them offers. So I think it's not a hard and fast rule that having a formal degree would immediately imply that, or rather, not having a formal degree would necessarily imply that you'll be out of the running for any software engineering role. And if that really is the case, that probably isn't the kind of institution you want to work for anyway.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey, Alwyn.
Hello.
Joe here.
Hi.
I happen to see your LinkedIn status, and it says that you are hiring manager as well. Yeah. So,
Guilty as charged.
Want to check what qualities are you looking for in your upcoming team members?
Sure. So I'm going to speak generally as an OGP officer. So what I kind of mentioned for engineers, we kind of also look for in our other roles as well. So designers, product managers, and so on. So typically we look at four main attributes, right? So ability, like is the person actually capable of doing his work. So in the context of software engineers, can the person actually think programmatically? Can he reason about code well? Can the person on top of that, can the person code? Is he comfortable in his coding environment? Is he able to navigate Stack Overflow without too much trouble if he gets stuck? Can he can he study MDN web docs without to try to look for something that can address his needs, right? And can the person actually talk about code? Is the person actually able to collaborate with his or her colleagues and convey what technical problems he or she might be encountering in a manner that other people can understand? Can the person actually address a non-technical audience about a technical topic? So and so on. So that's kind of what we look out for in terms of the ability for people in software engineering roles. On top of that, for OGP, we tend to look at other things. So we value initiative, this ability, this kind of idea that you're a self-starter, you just crack on with things on your own, you don't really need direction and guidance and that sort of thing. We value communication, as I've somewhat articulated earlier, and I think I guess, but quite peculiar to government and public sector work, we do look out for people who have values, i.e., does the person actually care about the public service? Does she care about making Singapore a better, slightly better, ever so slightly a better place to be in? So those hopefully would give you a good flavor of like what we kind of look out for in our applicants. So if there's anything specific you want me to get into, let me know.
Yeah, just one follow-up question. When you talked about values, does it mean that what's your contribution in the community in terms of building open source software, or? Maybe
it doesn't necessarily have to be within the open source community. I think when we talk about values, we do talk about like the public good in general. So it could mean participation in food distribution. It could mean being volunteering for various social welfare causes and the like, right? It could be simply a desire to want to try to push for change, right?
Awesome. Thanks a lot. That answers it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Hi, Alwyn. I'm Yiting. I'm just wondering, like, what are the kind of technologies that one would need if you're looking to work in GovTech, or like what kind of maybe like frameworks do you guys use there?
Okay, so I'm going to speak in two contexts, right? So one, I'm going to speak in the context of OGP, and then I'll try to speak in the context of the wider GovTech. So OGP so when we are recruiting, we don't actually look out for specific experience in specific frameworks or libraries and that sort of thing, because our sentiment is that generally technology changes at such a breakneck pace that even if you have experience in a particular thing, that information might be rendered irrelevant within the next couple of years or so. So really, we value this ability to pick up things quickly as you go along, because I think that would probably stand you in good stead in long term in your career as a software engineer. So, but for what it's worth, OGP mainly works on web-based applications. So for better or worse, we are mostly working with Node.js, TypeScript, and using React as our front-end framework. We do feel that it's just a lot easier if like everything, the entire stack is based on the same language. And so, for better or worse, we are using Node.js with its advantages and its drawbacks. On top of that, I guess AWS tends to be what we use for our cloud provider. We tend to use Postgres quite a lot, although there are instances of using MongoDB and so on. So that's OGP. With the wider GovTech, well, GovTech is actually quite a big place. So yes, I think GDS probably has similar, shall we say, working requirements as we do, especially when it comes to building web applications. I do know that they have a few Ruby-based applications floating around, although it's been quite a while since I last checked in with them, so that things might have changed. But beyond GDS and OGP, it really depends on the department that you apply to. I mean, I am aware that like there are some teams within GovTech who would actually use C# and Unity and basically build like the equivalent of 3D visualization applications for whichever purposes lah. But yeah, it really depends lah. So is there a particular line of inquiry that you're looking at, Yixing?
No, I'm just trying to know like what are more the common frameworks that like companies look out for, or like that's adopted by companies or like organizations.
Okay, I don't know. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Remember, so like I actually started my career working with Java and the Spring framework and enterprise relational databases and that sort of thing. And it for a long time it actually stood me in good stead lah. But as is evidently clear, whatever I'm working on now has no relation whatsoever to what I'm working back then, right? So I think it's important to understand that much as like employers are looking for specific skill sets, and that's perfectly fine because they probably don't want to wait for you to pick things up. They kind of want you to hit the ground running. It's important to note that that you probably have to keep to devote a certain amount of time trying to figure out what's out there, what's relevant, what's slowly falling out of relevance, and actually to know what is actually possible with software engineering. I mean, that's the only way that you can. I would think that that would be the only way that you can stay relevant in your industry, and for your employer to stay relevant in its field. So
I see. Just one more question, which is like, how was your transition from like Java to like the kind of framework that's being used in?
I see. Interesting question. So I think I guess it was a happy circumstance, isn't it? So even though I was holding down my day job, like writing Java and like just wrestling with the Spring framework and complaining about static types and that sort of thing. I did have time left over outside of office hours to actually like run around and mess with things. So, and one of the first few things that I kind of did outside of my day job was to basically build a Chrome extension, which, as you would know, has to be based on JavaScript. There's no other way you can actually have a Chrome extension working if you didn't use the same language as the lingua franca of most web pages. So that's kind of my first brush with JavaScript and what and its quirks and the various things that make it both frustrating and a wonderful language to work with. So of course so I guess that kind of helped me a lot when I finally went with GovTech. It kind of did make that transition a little less jarring. There were still some niggling bits that I had to get my head around, like why exactly do you have to use a await keyword for asynchronous operations and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Alwyn.
Hi,
It's
Chris.
Kita. Hi. Maybe as a follow-on question, I think one of the things that the students, it's difficult for them to have a viewpoint on is really what the differences are in the landscape of different kinds of jobs, and then also between these different kinds of ways of coding something. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about maybe in the industry, like maybe more at like at a job level, what the kind of organizational differences are between working in a bank and working, it sounds like in your current role, things are more, you could say modern or.
Right.
Yeah.
So could I clarify your question? Is the question really, how does your job scope vary depending on the kind of organization you work for?
Well, maybe in your specific experience, I guess it sounds like I would characterize working in a bank as more, maybe there's more safeguards or more structure in place. Sure. If you're working with trading software, and then maybe if you're working with open government, kind of more open source, or like there's a little bit more room if things go wrong, or how does that work out like in your day-to-day job?
Okay, that's okay. I think I get the gist of your question, and I'll try to answer. If I veer off topic, just let me know, and I'll try to reposition. So, I think there is. It's kind of funny because like the banks that I worked for were painfully aware that they were heavily regulated by the financial regulatory authorities that have jurisdiction over them. So that would be the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK and MES in Singapore. So those were the two that I was familiar with. I guess because Morgan Stanley was a US bank, the Federal Reserve also had a bunch of things to say. And I think the banks were rightfully cautious about how change comes about in your data center. So to that end, I guess there was a lot of paperwork that's put in place, a lot of checks and balances to make sure that like things happen in a way such that in the event that they get audited, the regulator actually has access to the information that they need to go about their work. So I do feel that like the bureaucracy, as it were, was justifiable in a place that in an industry that is heavily regulated as finance. Some banks would actually implement these checks and balances more effectively than others. I think I was fortunate in starting out my career with a bank like Morgan Stanley, which actually placed a lot of emphasis on technology as an enabler for excuse me, an enabler for more effective business, more effective relationships with their clients, and so even like when it's difficult to like push something through, at least there are certain things in place that would actually facilitate that process. So it didn't feel as painful as it otherwise could have been. Let's contrast this with like what I'm doing now. It is kind of so in my first week with GovTech, one of the things that I needed to do was to push a schema change for database into production, right? And funnily enough, I kind of asked my colleague, so do I need to fill out any paperwork just so that we give notice that this is happening? And he was like, no, it's okay, just run the command, just push it production, right? And I was like, really? I was like, yeah, just do it, man. What's the worst that can happen, right? So yeah, that was refreshing. I'm not sure that was necessarily a pleasant surprise coming from a tightly controlled environment like banking, but I think that I think it really depends on like the need for controls and compliance really depends on the kind of what's at stake, isn't it? Right? In finance, you have potential threats from fraud, financing of terrorism, and that sort of thing, and maybe and stability of the markets and that sort of thing. And rightly, the regulators would demand the checks and balances to be in place. In other places, maybe the stakes aren't so high. Like if I'm going to be prototyping a Quora for government and it falls down, and there are no users and there are no agencies involved, does it really matter? Maybe I can rapidly prototype something, and then maybe we can worry about the checks and balances as we gain more traction. FormSG would probably be a very interesting example of this, and maybe in due course we can maybe talk a little bit about like how the developer practice for FormSG kind of changed over time, where it was just this very scrappy thing run by like three random engineers using an open source code base to do, amongst other things, forms for pigeon counting in town council, to this really full-blown application that accepts SingPass as for verified forms and can take in and has taken in 110 million submissions to date. Two very, very, very different scenarios, two very, very different approaches to ensuring stability, two very, very different kinds of stakes involved. So yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's definitely given me something to think about. Yeah.
One follow-up question. Do you have any right now opinion about which you prefer? Is it just a trade-off, or would you ever go back to banking?
It's fun. I do have a desire to return to finance at some point. I don't think that desire is now. There are a lot of public interest problems that are out there, and I kind of want to see where that takes me first. But I think my initial career with finance has left the impression that like whether we like it or not, money is quite a big part of modern society, and it's interesting to actually see how that changes over, how the development of how we shift around large amounts of money changes over time. So.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Akira.
Yeah, Alwyn, I actually have a related question to
Go on,
Akira's one. It's somewhat the same thing, but might take a different form. What are your opinions on new software engineers going to startups versus going to big tech or big non-tech? Because I understand the considerations are usually like, the scope of the work, flexibility, pace, and growth. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on this.
So, Yeah, I have two conflicting thoughts right now that in my head as you kind of mentioned this, right? So I think I did allude to the freedom that you would get from being in a very scrappy setting like a startup, where you can actually have that kind of liberty to go figure out what should you use to best address, like say, implementing a feature and stuff like that. You contrast that with the enterprise, and they might say, we have this one way to do it, and we must make it consistent across the board, because otherwise the regulators would be upset, or something along those lines, right? So, so there is that a benefit of like being in a place where there isn't that much structure and you're free to try to explore. That said, my main concern for engineers joining startups is the lack of mentoring. I think it's more than likely that a lot of the talent that is out there. No, actually, that's not entirely true, is it? I guess my main concern is that like what I do see with a lot of the startups startups out there is that like there are very few engineers within the startup. So consequently, the likelihood of you getting mentorship, of a person getting mentorship from a more experienced engineer, tends to be a bit lower. I guess that so if that is so if that's the kind of situation that that an engineer finds himself in, I think there has to be a lot of deliberate effort made to try to figure out to stay relevant, to keep understanding what constitutes best practice, and to basically find somebody who can actually provide that kind of guidance for career development. So I know that there are groups community groups out there that kind of precisely cater to those things which I kind of talked about. So Michael Cheng, who has spoken to earlier Rocket Academy batches, he runs Junior Developers Singapore, and I think what he has done there has been beneficial for the dev community at large. And I think maybe I can't remember my conversations with him, but I would imagine that he started that group precisely to help engineers who may not be getting enough mentorship to actually come together and actually learn from each other. So yeah, so those will be my the thoughts that kind of are off the top of my head as you with regards to your question.
And I actually have a related question also.
Go on
And
then.
how does OGP onboard new engineers? Because I looked at LinkedIn and saw that there was like a 30% headcount growth in the past 6 months, and that's a lot of new people.
You've been doing your homework, haven't you?
Yeah, so like with all that fast growth, how do you get new engineers to up to pace to contribute effectively?
I think that's certainly something that we're still working on. Oddly enough, I am part of a handful of engineers who has been tasked to try to figure out what our engineering practices are or should be. And one of these things would be figuring out an onboarding guide. So I don't think I have a straight answer for you at this point in time, because we are still in the middle of trying to establish our practices. And but I guess off the top of my head, so we do so when we do bring somebody in, we'll typically embed them with one of the more established teams within OGP. So I think currently that would either be FormSG or Postman. Actually no. Okay. Back then it would have been Postman, which is basically MailChimp for government, or one of the other teams which have been around for quite some time. The idea is that through learning and observing, we hope that the new engineer would be onboarded by basically getting comfortable with the practices established within a team. I think what we should be doing now would be to try to formalize more of these things in written format and actually document some of the things that we are already implicitly practicing within the more established teams. So yeah, I think that's pretty much as I can say at this point in time. If anything else comes up, I'll mention it.
Thank you.
I actually like to go a level before that and
Sure.
ask about the hiring process for onboarding.
So the hiring process for OGP?
Yes.
Okay. So typically what happens is, assuming that, I would typically, some of us would typically receive your CVs via the application, the job role application that we have on our site, right? Assuming that you get past the CV screening stage, there will be a round of online coding tests that which kind of consists of programming exercises to see whether just as a quick filter to see whether you are capable and comfortable with coding. And assuming you get past that, you then be put through two coding exercises back to back. We will do it in person, but in light of recent circumstances, these are typically conducted using video conferencing. So typically these coding exercises will consist of a end goal you have to reach, and that you have to reach using a series of tasks that will iterate on on the code that you're kind of writing. The coding exercises are generally meant to test to exercise you on the three things that we're looking out for, like whether the person can think programmatically and reason about code, whether the person is comfortable in coding environment, can the person actually communicate and convey technical ideas and problems to the interviewer. So typically that's kind of what happens. Assuming you clear those two things, then you have an interview with our director, the head of OGP, and that's typically a free-form interview where he would ask you. Sometimes he might ask you about technical questions and what you understand. Sometimes he might ask you about things about, like, what are your values, what kind of experience, what life and work experiences have you had in the past, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so that's typically the battery of assessments that we kind of have in place when assessing engineers.
Oh, sweet. Cool. Thank you for sharing. I'm just curious about the online coding test and two coding exercise. Is it somewhat like a DSA sort of test?
I'm not familiar with DSA, so you might have to fill me in here.
It's a data structures and algorithms test.
Right, I see. So I would like to think that they are not DSA. I really, I think my opinion, and I think the opinion of most engineers in OGP, is that DSA kind of consists of bookwork, and bookwork can be studied for. And as such, I tend to think that they don't serve as a very good indicator of capability. So to answer your question, my opinion is that the questions don't consist of bookwork, and so they won't really consist of DSA. And really, we are more interested in seeing what happens when we throw a problem at you.
I see. Cool. Thank you very much. Because my batch, we just started on our DSA as well, and coming from a non computer science background, that section is like, woof.
Yeah, I can imagine it can be it can be a bit overwhelming at first, but yeah. I think it's important to know that as you go through go through those exercises, try to be deliberate in figuring out, like, how do these things fit together? Why is it a certain way, right? And how can I answer those questions based on first principles, because those things rather than understanding your having your DSA at your immediate disposal would probably last you a lot longer in your career, especially since the state of the art tends to keep changing all the time. So yeah, I thought I'll just leave that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hey, Alwyn.
Hi.
I'm Samantha. I have two follow-up questions
Go on, then.
based on the answers you gave.
Mm.
The first is you mentioned that one of the downsides of maybe working at a startup is not having enough mentorship. What kind of expectations do you have for your own team members to provide mentorship to junior engineers on the rest of their team? And the second is if your team doesn't evaluate candidates through data structures and algorithms, technical tests, then what are the technical tests?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack. I'll try my best. So in terms of mentorship, I really wish I can give you a confident answer, but I think the reality is because OGP tends to be quite flat, we ourselves are still trying to figure out how we should provide structured guidance to our junior engineers. I wish I can give you a straight answer, but I think that this is the reality that we kind of have. I have seen some of the more senior engineers within OGP basically in their one-on-ones with the more junior engineers. They would say, okay, look, let me go through Coursera and go identify some courses that I think might be beneficial for you in the long run. That's a lot of effort being that's a fair amount of effort being spent to try to get the juniors to level up. And I do hope that that's something that we can try to embrace as a practice amongst ourselves. But right now it's not. Right now there isn't a formal structure in terms of like how mentorship happens. So other things that I can talk about in this area. I think more recently I've been trying to toy with the idea of pair programming, where I basically just sit next to either an intern or a less experienced engineer, and then as we go along, I see how this guy implements something, or they see how I implement something. And I think one of the nice things is that there is, even though the feedback and the mentoring is pretty ad hoc, I think they found that people have actually learned quite a fair bit by saying, it's like, oh no, why are you doing it that way, right? And so on. So yeah, so to answer your question, the kind of mentorship that kind of happens within OGP either take the form of the more senior engineers going out of their way to find the courses or articles that the more junior engineers can or maybe even should read, and and using pair programming to actually facilitate that transfer of knowledge and advice. So that's one question. The other question is, if I don't, what do I actually look out for in the interview? So remember what I mentioned about like reasoning about code and a program and thinking programmatically. So typically, as the person is working through the tasks, one of the things that I would start to look out for is like, how's this person trying to approach the problem? Does he realize that there's more than one way to approach the problem? Is he choosing between those approaches? Can he figure out like why a certain approach might be favored over another approach, and so on? In terms of whether the person is comfortable in the coding environment, things I tend to look things that I would try to observe and notice would include like, is the person struggling with his IDE, or is he like having no problems working his way through the code? Is he making full use of like say IntelliSense or even like Emacs shortcuts? If the person is trying to look up documentation, where does he go? Is he studying the documentation carefully, and so on? So, and in terms of talking, well, it kind of comes up during the communication. So based on how well or how poorly the person articulates, I have a good sense of like how well the person can actually convey an idea to somebody else. So I'm not sure whether that answers the question for you, but
I think you mentioned earlier that there is like an automated test.
The online coding test. What of it?
Yeah. So in that case, if the candidate wouldn't be talking through their problem, problems, and what kind of problems are like on this take-home like coding test? That is it like building a small app or API?
Right. So it's not a take-home test. In fact, it's like a timed test that would last maybe a little over 60 over how long was it now? A little over an hour, I think. And basically, those consist of a number of very self-contained programming exercises, lah. So given this problem, write this implementation kind of thing, right? So so typically, I would look at not just the score, but also how the person wrote the implementation, and then from there, I realized that it's an online test, so there's only so much I can infer from it. But really, what the question I'm asking myself is, can I justify bringing this person in for an interview, lah? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the questions, by the way. This has been quite interesting thinking about them.
Alwyn Tan here.
Hi.
Yeah, I have two questions. So I guess the first question is, okay, so some background. I'm transiting from public service to actually joining a bootcamp, so I haven't started yet. Yeah, so the first question is, as a new graduate, either from a CS or a bootcamp kind of environment, how do you choose which kind of company to join? Are there things you weigh a bit more than others?
Okay. Let me think carefully, because I know this question does bear a lot of weight, lah. I would think that given that people are relatively new, coming either out of university or bootcamp, one of the things that you kind of need to do is to learn enough to master the craft that we call software engineering. So I would veer towards roles that would actually give the person the space to actually pursue and pick up new things as they go along. I would veer towards roles that through conversations with the hiring manager and the interviewers would come across to me as places which would accommodate new engineers, which would actually be vested in trying to grow them and help them become better at what they do. So those would probably be the things that I would look out for. I realize that compensation is also a thing, because we all have to feed our face after all, right? So I can imagine that it's not an easy decision to make, like whether you choose between monetary compensation and an environment that you feel would actually help you to grow. I have taken on roles in the past that just on the basis of monetary compensation alone, and I can tell you, please don't do that. You might find that you have to leave quite quickly as a result when you realize that the environment isn't as accommodating as you hope it to be. So.
Okay. So just another question. So let's say you get into a software engineering role, right? I read somewhere that as a software engineer, you spend about 30% programming and you are doing other stuff most of the time. So how do you describe like a day in your life as a software engineer at any of the companies you have worked for, other than programming?
Other than programming, not a straight answer, because my roles and my routines have changed over time. So like what I was doing when I first started out at Morgan Stanley would definitely be a lot different from what I am doing now right now. So I think aside from writing code, a lot of our time. Okay, maybe I'm going to constrain the question a little bit, just so that the answer is a little more relevant, lah. So with OGP, aside from time spent on coding, I think a lot of time is also spent with in discussions and in coordination work lah. So we definitely don't work alone. We typically work in a product team that involves designers and product managers as well. So typically a fair amount of time is actually spent like going over to some of the others, some of the other members of the TMB and just trying to figure out like what is best for this particular application. Is this behavior, is this UI behavior intended, and so on. Are you sure you want to make that particular call for that particular feature in this product? So there is a fair amount of coordination work involved when building products at OGP. And yeah, so I guess that's the one thing that kind of comes to mind right now. A lot of my time was also spent talking to other engineers when they get stuck with their problems. I think that's just by virtue of the fact that I've kind of been around for in the industry for a little longer than most others in my department lah. So are there any concerns that you have?
I guess the concern is not in terms of ability, but because for us we're sort of like mid-career transitioning through mid-career lah. So we're trying to see how we can bridge the skills that we have on top of what we are learning now as a software engineering kind of a graduate.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries.
Hey, Alwyn, just to bounce off Shanan's question, kind of want to ask you as a systems engineer by training. I understand your formal training is in systems engineering.
I'll get to that, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, and as a hiring manager, in your experience, how much or how little does intimate understanding, familiarity with computer science fundamentals help or hinder someone, whether it's in navigating tech stacks that are foreign to them, or whether it's in doing well in the interview? That's one. And two, as a hiring manager, what would you say sort of makes someone stand out when they're not from a formal computer science training or background? When you hire bootcamp graduates or when you hire people who are self-taught, what makes them stand out? What makes them a bit different than any other one who knows how to code? And to that end, would being familiar with non-tech areas like Scrum or Agile, or just some the familiar processes and workflow help someone in that job hunt?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. So let's see. Let's be clear here. I'm not a systems engineering graduate. Kai is laughing because we had a little bit of an exchange over LinkedIn about this. So my degree is information systems engineering because it was issued by the electrical engineering department of Imperial College. Apparently, the Department of Computing in Imperial has a monopoly on the word computer in degree titles. So unfortunately, that means I can't say I'm a computer engineer, for better or worse. But yeah, so to answer your question, I think my academic discipline is a little different from what you were anticipating. So as to your actual question, how much does CS actually help in one's interview process and career? I think it does help considerably. One of the things that I hope to see in university graduates is not so much their paper qualifications, but really, has university helped them to think better? Has university allowed them to reason about things in a way that they wouldn't have been able to had they not gone to university. So there are modules within university that kind of consist of, like, say, reasoning, thinking formally about programs, and similar modules like that. So typically that's I would like to imagine that that's what helps your typical com science grad as he works his way through the interview process and then later on in his career. So yeah, that's what I that's the question about Comsci graduates. For people from non-traditional backgrounds, I guess what I look out for, aside from his formal education qualifications, is also the things that I kind of alluded to earlier. What are you doing with with the time that you have on your hands during your job search? Are you do you realize that like your education does not stop at your university or your bootcamp as a graduate? And if so, are you continuing to improve on yourself? Are you continuing to keep track of what's happening out there in industry? Other things that kind of stand out for me is where exactly are you applying your newfound knowledge? Are there things that you've taken an interest in and have decided to apply your software engineering skill set on? So case in point, I was a user for a peer-to-peer lender in the UK. And one of the things that I've always found very frustrating is like the general clunkiness of their user interface. So one day I decided I'm not going anywhere with their tech support. I'm going to take matters into my own hands and start building the interface of myself for myself. So that kind of gave rise to the Chrome extension that I kind of alluded to earlier on. So to answer your question, it's not just the educational qualifications I'm interested in. I'm interested to see what you have done with those educational qualifications. So
awesome. Any last questions for Alwyn? You guys are running a bit short on time. All right, Alwyn, maybe I can ask what do you call it? What do you call this? Concluding follow-up?
Yeah, go on.
Follow-up question. Maybe just a general question, and then we usually do this at the end of the Q&As, which is to ask if you have any general advice for the group here who are entering the software engineering industry for the first time. They're switching careers from something a lot of times very different, with some people from school, from marketing, from design, from public service. What would some advice be for people who are entering the industry for the first time?
I would say this isn't going to be the end of your learning journey, and I think you're probably gonna learn this at some point. So don't such a deep philosophical question, Kai. It's taking me a while to try to come up with something. So, but yes, this definitely is not going to be the end of your learning journey. Every day as I go to work, I'm still learning new things, and I'm still trying to stay on top of my brief, as it were. So, continue to figure out what's out there. Continue to figure out like how you can keep improving on yourself. Continue to keep those skills sharp by applying it somewhere. There are a lot of projects out there which could use help, right? So the open source community is one of them. Better SG has a lot of community-driven voluntary projects which kind of look out for people that work on software engineering problems for social good, right? That's one possible avenue you could apply yourself. Find something to try to practice, to keep practice. And I think what you'll realize as time passes on is that the job search for software engineering role tends to be a lot less scary if you're already in practice, if you're already a practitioner and you kind of know things, your way around things. So yeah, just keep at it, keep practicing, keep reading, keep developing yourself. I'm gonna shamelessly plug my employer. If you guys want things to work on, we are a lot of our stuff is open source. So if you go to github.com/opengovsg, one word, I think if somebody could type that down on chat for that would be helpful.
I got it.
We'll be happy to take your take pull requests from members of the public, and that might be one avenue that you could practice on. And so that's probably the general advice that I'll be giving for this batch.
Thank you so much, Alvin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
having
time.
me.
Thanks for your time.
you.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.